Distinguished representatives, I kindly ask you to regain your seats so we can start this plenary. Welcome to this plenary on agenda item 12, review of the International Criminal Court and the Rome Statute system. Ambassador Paul van den Ysel, Ambassador Michael Kanu, distinguished representatives of Deputy Prosecutor and distinguished representatives of the ICC, state representatives, good afternoon to your excellencies, distinguished delegates, court focal points, staff union council, representatives of civil society, the ICCBA, and all relevant stakeholders who have been participated in this exercise and are present today here. I declare open the 5th plenary meeting of the 20th session of the Assembly of State Parties, which is dedicated to agenda item 12, on the review of the International Criminal Court and the Rome Statute system. It is really my pleasure to be present at this meeting, which will consider this subject which is of great importance for the Court, indeed a top priority of the Assembly and stakeholders, and it has also becoming increasingly evident over the past year. I will be present throughout this meeting, and I very much look forward to hearing your views on the review. I will now leave this plenary meeting in the competent hands of the chairpersons of the review mechanism, Ambassador van den Ysel and Ambassador Kanu. I hand over to you, ambassadors, and I wish the review mechanism, states parties, the court, and all of you very productive discussions. I can even give you the hammer.
Okay. Well, thank you, Madam President. You made my day. Thank you very much, and also for being in our midst in this plenary on the review of the International Criminal Court and the Rome Statute system. As you have just done, but also at many occasions, you have underlined the importance of this exercise for the court, and for state parties and all stakeholders. And given your long-standing and special link with the court in many aspects now, we know that you take this issue very much at heart. For the order of business of this afternoon, we will first invite one of the court's focal points to make some remarks. After we, Michael and I, it's again a two-man show like last Monday, the co-chairs of the review mechanism have delivered our remarks. As we have indicated in the concept note, which you have seen last Sunday, we would like this meeting, to the extent possible, to be an interactive discussion. It is intended to provide a platform for a broader exchange of views on the review process and on policy issues, and to give the opportunity to all delegations, including to those that have not always been able to participate more fully during the year, to contribute to these important discussions. We very much encourage you to take advantage of the presence of the review mechanism, the court focal points, and the President herself to raise any questions or comments you may have on the review process. While there is a list of speakers, which of course we will follow, we encourage you to take the floor to make any points that you wish to raise after we have exhausted the list of speakers. We have received some statements via video link, which would also be played during the discussions. And since this meeting is live streamed, we wish to remind those participating remotely, as indicated in the concept note, that they have the opportunity to send questions or comments via the email to the address indicated in the note. And we intend to also answer and react to those questions and comments so as to ensure that all participants can contribute in the discussion we will be having this afternoon. So far about the technology of this afternoon. Let's go to the substance. You would recall that at the first plenary meeting, we introduced the report of the review mechanism on the review process, which had been submitted pursuant to the resolution ASP20 Res 7 of last year. The review mechanism submitted the categorization of recommendations on the 30th of April and the comprehensive action plan on the 30th of June, in accordance with that resolution. And the categorization has formed the basis of our work, and together with the comprehensive action plan, they serve as a roadmap for the assessment of all the recommendations throughout the review process. The review mechanism allocated recommendations to different facilitations as a platform for discussion. And we welcome the work of the facilitators on the IAR recommendations and are grateful that they considered the recommendations that had been assigned to them in the CAP as a platform for discussion. As I think you're all aware, the mechanism has also allocated some recommendations to itself, as was indicated in the resolution. And we have held a series of meetings which I think were productive to discuss the assessment of those recommendations. We also note that some recommendations that the mechanism in the Comprehensive Action Plan identified for assessment in 2022 have already been assessed by some facilitations and also sometimes by the court. And we welcome this progress, while some that were mentioned for assessment in the second half of 2021, that is the other side of the coin, have had to be deferred to 2022. As we have mentioned many times before, this is not a completely automized process, and we recognize that we have to be flexible to allow for developments or circumstances out of the control of the main actors. I do, however, urge all stakeholders to do what is possible to stick to the ambitious timetable of the Comprehensive Action Plan. And the positive news here is that in the first half year of 2022, there is certainly less pre-ASP stress, as I would call it, so that leaves more time for good discussion on the assessment of the recommendations. As to the work of the review mechanism itself as a platform, we will issue a work program at the beginning of next year, and key issues will be, amongst others, the unified governance recommendations, the issue of tenure, and relations with civil society. But I say amongst others, there are others as well. Dear delegates, the review is not a box-ticking exercise, but at the end of the day, we have a common goal, which is to strengthen the court and the Rome Statute system and make it more efficient and effective. That means that the discussions on the recommendations should result in concrete changes on the ground. Therefore, we intend to organize in 2022 also discussions or roundtables, we still have to think about the exact format, on the implementation of recommendations that were positively assessed previously. For example, but I stress example, there may be others, on the issue of working culture. We all agreed with the recommendations, but what are we actually doing? And there may be other similar discussions as well. The Comprehensive Action Plan sets out the timelines for assessment of the IR recommendations. The second half of 2021, we had a bulk of recommendations. That year is almost past. Many in 2022 and some remaining recommendations in 2023. And once again, I stress, it also indicates the entities that are responsible for the assessment and for the implementation. The work of the mechanism on this comprehensive document was complex and benefited greatly from the input of states parties, ASP mandate holders, the ASP presidency, the court focal points, individual office of the court, staff union council, civil society, and the Bar Association. And as part of our work, as we said on Monday, but I'll repeat it here, we routinely consulted these entities at each stage of this work, and we will continue to do so. At this stage, I would like to ask Michael to take over. Michael, please.
Thank you, Ambassador van der Rijssel. Thank you, Paul. Excellencies, distinguished representatives. You may recall that we circulated a matrix last Friday. The idea of the matrix is to give an overview of where we are in the review process, both on assessment and on implementation. We indicated in our message that if there were any errors, we would resolve them with the facilitators concerned. The matrix is included as Annex 2 of the report of the review mechanism submitted post-1 to ICC ASP 19-7, paragraph 9. And it has been issued as document ICC ASP 20/36. We thank the facilitators and the facilitations for providing updated information on the issues we missed in our first version. We remain open to discussing with any facilitator the need for updates or corrections to the information on their facilitations. As we indicated in our message by which we circulated the matrix last Friday, the matrix is purely factual overview of the state of the review as an informative tool to state parties and other stakeholders. It should be read in conjunction with the Comprehensive Action Plan. It covers those recommendations that are due to be assessed in 2021 according to the Comprehensive Action Plan. Where some recommendations indicated in the Comprehensive Action Plan for assessment in 2022, but were already assessed in this year, the outcome of those assessments have also been reflected. We noted in our report that the matrix contains information from the reports on the different facilitations, as we mentioned on Monday. We thank and commend the ASP mandate holders for their work in having many of the recommendations assigned to them assessed. We would like to once more stress that the timeline on implementation are meant to be indicative and can be further discussed in the appropriate facilitations. We would like to highlight that the matrix is a living document which we intend to update regularly in order to provide a regular overview of the state of the review. We intend to update the matrix at least twice a year. Excellencies, distinguished representatives, we are pleased to inform you that the standalone resolution of the review mechanism is agreed. And preambular paragraph 8 has passed through the silence procedure and is now agreed ad ref. We once again thank state parties for the constructive engagement and the flexibility shown throughout the informal consultations. The resolution will be introduced tomorrow, as will the other Assembly resolutions. Finally, and on even very positive note, there is a related resolution on the outcome of the work of the study group on governance on the recommendations of the independent expert, that is recommendations 381 to 384 and recommendations 76 to 78. This is demonstrative of the commitment of state parties and all stakeholders to assess and implement recommendations to strengthen the court and the Rome Statute system. In the report of the Bureau on the study group governance, issued as document ICC ASP 20/21, the work done on the independent experts' recommendations, the agreed recommendation text to the Assembly was adopted. And the Assembly in the first plenary session already took note of the work of the Bureau, including this language that went through a silence procedure of the study group and later of the Bureau. We commend the study group on governance for the work done in good time, the transparent and inclusive approach taken in addressing the recommendations, which the court noted were of high priority. This related resolution will also be introduced tomorrow and has been circulated via email. We shall now proceed to remarks to be made by the court. We would like to invite the court to make some remarks. We have had a very fruitful interaction with the court focal point throughout the year, and we thank them for their cooperation and assistance. I now give the floor to the Deputy Prosecutor, Mr. James Stewart, one of the court focal points, to speak on behalf of the court. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Kanu. Madam President of the Assembly of States Parties, Your Excellencies, Ambassador van den Eyssel and Ambassador Kanu, Excellencies, colleagues and friends. As Deputy Prosecutor, I am pleased to make these few comments on behalf of my fellow court focal points, Hirad Abtahi, Chef de Cabinet to the President, and Osvaldo Zavala Hiler, Senior Special Assistant to the Registrar. Together, we have worked and spoken as one court. As focal points for the court, working with our respective teams, we've engaged with the review mechanism in a cooperative, constructive, and productive way. We were fortunate to have enjoyed an excellent working relationship with the co-chairs of the review mechanism, the chairs of the ASP mandate holders, and other stakeholders in a common endeavor to strengthen the International Criminal Court. We've made very good progress this year in assessing recommendations of the independent group of experts and in many instances, implementing them. I would like to express our profound appreciation for the extraordinary work that Ambassadors van den Ijssel and Kanu have done, together with the ad country representatives of Bangladesh, Chile, and Poland throughout this endeavor. The report the court has filed describes the progress we've made in assessing recommendations and taking action. The review process is one we regard as vital to the evolution of the ICC within the Rome Statute system of international criminal justice and the reinforcement of its ability to deliver effectively on the mandate the framers of the Rome Statute gave it. The court's overall response to the report of the independent experts, which contains its preliminary analysis of the recommendations and information on relevant activities, remains topical, but much has happened since it was submitted. As court focal points, we contributed, along with the state's parties and other stakeholders, in an inclusive and consultative process to the work of the review mechanism, respecting the categorization and allocation of recommendations and the setting of timelines. We contributed in the same way to the comprehensive action plan created by the review mechanism and approved by the Bureau. In accordance with the timeline set out in the plan, we actively and productively engaged with the review mechanism and ASP mandate holders in a series of facilitations involving the court, states parties, and civil society stakeholders. These facilitations provided platforms for the assessment of recommendations and discussion on further action. We reported in detail through these platforms on progress achieved within the court on the assessment of recommendations, as well as further actions undertaken by the court. This reporting is now reflected in the reports of the review mechanism, the Bureau, and the Assembly mandate holders who've submitted their reports through the Bureau to the ASP. For the sake of efficiency and to avoid duplication, yet ensure completeness, we have referenced the relevant Bureau reports in our report on behalf of the court. The facilitations done this year have covered a spectrum of recommendations relating to matters such as, for the judiciary specifically, election of the presidency, induction and continuing professional development for the judges, full-time service of judges, the Code of Judicial Ethics, and judicial collegiality, efficiency of the judicial process and fair trial rights, transitions in the judiciary, the generation of jurisprudence, but also, more generally, the matter of 2 deputy prosecutors, the need for an OTP senior media officer, the court's working culture, governance issues, including for the registry and the OTP, for example, election of the registrar, OTP staff training, OTP internal quality control mechanisms such as source evaluation, peer evidence reviews, trial readiness, trial monitoring, and other topics, as well as lessons learned. Complementarity, cooperation, GBGR issues respecting staff recruitment, amendments to the rules of evidence and procedure, legal aid, the IOM, and budget management oversight. In each of these facilitations, the court, through its focal points, has reported in detail on the assessment of recommendations and actions already undertaken. We've done this while managing the impact of the continuing pandemic and undergoing a transition to a new presidency and a new prosecutor. For his part, the prosecutor has been addressing a multiplicity of issues, from budget through working culture to the restructuring of the OTP. And we've had to preserve time and space for him to come to conclusions that may have an effect upon the assessment and implementation of certain recommendations. The prosecutor has also been working to gain a deep understanding of the situations and cases the court has on its plate, with a view to setting priorities and using resources to the best advantage. Similarly, we've had to preserve time and space for the presidency and judiciary, who are also examining new approaches to the processes that are part of their work, including a request by the President to the IOM to do an evaluation of working culture in the judiciary. With all these challenges, we have nevertheless made genuine progress. The assessment of recommendations will continue in the coming year. The Court will keep states, parties, and civil society stakeholders informed through the facilitations on actions it has undertaken to implement recommendations. The process has, to this point, focused primarily upon the Court and its activities, but we hope it will embrace a wider perspective and examine as well how states, parties, and civil society propose to do their part in strengthening the Rome Statute system of international criminal justice as a whole. No one should fear a loss of momentum. For its part, the Court is committed unequivocally to the success of the review process. Success is vital to the ability of the Court to accomplish its mandate, but it's also vital to the ability of states parties to realize the promise of the Rome Statute, which they created with the goal of protecting innocent children, women and men, from unimaginable atrocities that deeply shock the conscience of humanity. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Deputy Prosecutor, also for your kind words addressed to the mechanism. And I think on our turn, we know that we very much appreciated the cooperation with the focal points. Dear delegates, I would like now to turn to the speakers list. I have a speakers list of about 13. We will start with 2 group statements. We also have statements by civil society and some video statements, as I said before. I have a few requests. First of all, I think the idea is maybe in other plenaries as well that speakers speak from their place in the hall, so they don't have to come to the podium. I strongly urge you to stick to the time limit. We have, as I said, a long list, and I hope there will be some additional questions or comments coming from here or over the video. So please stick to the 3 minutes. And I think on that note, I will start, and the first on the list is the Ambassador of Finland, Päivi Kaukaranta, who will speak on behalf of the Northern Group. Ambassador Kaukaranta, I can't see where you are, but you have the floor. There, now I see you, sorry.
Madam President of the Assembly, Mr. Chairman, thank you for giving me the floor. As you said, today I'm honored to speak on behalf of the Nordic countries, namely Denmark, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, and my own country, Finland. We warmly welcome the opportunity to participate in this dialogue and reiterate our support for the review process. We consider it crucial for the future of the Court. The Nordic countries thank the review mechanism and the Assembly mandate holders for the immense amount of work this past year. We also welcome and commend the Court's efforts and engagement in the process. We continue to emphasize inclusivity and transparency as key elements for the legitimacy of the review process. This is a joint endeavor between the Court, the Assembly, and other stakeholders, including the civil society. We all share the goals of strengthening the performance of the Court and effective delivery of justice. The review process must be carried out in full respect of existing mandates of the Court and the Assembly, including continuously observing and safeguarding the Court's judicial and prosecutorial independence, as well as the Assembly's management oversight responsibility regarding the administration of the Court. Several topics of key importance to the Nordics were discussed in recent months, such as recommendations on the Court's working culture and human resources, zero tolerance of bullying, harassment and sexual harassment, internal grievance procedures, gender equality, and the trust fund of victims. We are pleased to see that many assessments were concluded and underline the timely implementation of positively assessed recommendations. As to the more complex issues, we hope that all stakeholders remain committed to keeping up the pace. We welcome the matrix as a useful tool for tracking progress and look forward to its updates. As we resume in 2022 some of the Nordic priorities include recommendations concerning unified governance as they inform and underpin many of the other recommendations. Gender equality, including gender mainstreaming and targeted actions. Working culture, internal grievance procedures and ethics. Budget management oversight issues. Addressing liquidity issues. Outstanding contributions and arrears. Human resource issues. Establishment of the tenure system and provision of assistance and reparations to victims. We also continue to place importance on recommendations related to the OTP and the court on the efficiency of activities. We believe that active participation by the court staff in the assessment and implementation is key to sustainable results. The Comprehensive Action Plan sets out an ambitious timeline. The Nordics, as small delegations, feel the weight of this exercise, but we are convinced of the need to move ahead with ambition and determination. We concurred with the goal of completing most assessments by the end of 2022. We encourage the review mechanism to exercise as much leadership as possible, and we would also recommend starting discussions early in 2022 to allow sufficient time for the meaningful engagement of all stakeholders. We would like to see the implementation of positively assessed recommendations pick up speed and look forward to receiving updates on results. Mr. Chair, I'm getting close to the end of my intervention. I would just say that a more complete version of the Nordic countries' remarks has been submitted as a written statement on the review process. And I would conclude by saying that posing a question to the review mechanism and other participants of this plenary session, what should the states parties do in the coming year to ensure the success of the process? I thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank Ambassador Calcarante. Your question is noted and we may come back to it. Next is Côte d'Ivoire on behalf of the African Group. Monsieur l'ambassadeur, vous avez la parole.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Madam President, I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the African states parties to the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. The African states parties to the Rome Statute welcome this plenary session on the review mechanism as a platform for exchange of views on the review process and take this opportunity to commend the review mechanism for carrying out its mandate with transparency and inclusiveness. We thank the review mechanism for its important accomplishments thus far. The categorization of the independent expert recommendations, the report on the overall progress, and the comprehensive action plan. The African states parties also take note with satisfaction of the report of the review mechanism and the matrix which take into account and reflect the consultations made with the state parties, the court, and all stakeholders. The matrix presents a useful overview of the state of the review process and completes the comprehensive action plan. Therefore, we encourage the review mechanism to continue its ambitious approach and maintain the current pace of the review process. Madam President, the African states parties attach great importance to the work of the review mechanism of ICC and the Rome Statute system. In this connection, we reaffirm our commitment to the review process for the strengthening of the court and its effectiveness through, inter alia, good governance, the principle of complementarity, cooperation, and promotion of equitable geographical representation and gender balance. Therefore, we support the review of the ICC and the Rome Statute system and the work of the review mechanism. And we remain engaged and fully committed in this important review process. In this regard, the African states parties reiterate the African Union heads of state and government decision on the ICC, urging for engagement in the review process and to address the issue of politicization of the court. To conclude, Madam President, the African states parties remain convinced in the hope that our collective efforts in the review of the ICC and the Rome Statute system, as well as the work of the review mechanism, will contribute to strengthening the court and the Rome Statute system in its effectiveness, legitimacy, and capacity to deliver effective justice and end impunity for atrocity crimes. Je vous remercie de votre attention.
I thank you. Je vous remercie, Monsieur l'Ambassadeur, for your statement and for your kind words addressed to the members of the review mechanism. Next on my list is the Ambassador of Australia, Ambassador Matthew Neuhaus. Ambassador Neuhaus, please, you have the floor.
Madam President, Your Excellencies, colleagues, it is almost 2 years to the day that this Assembly launched by consensus a state-driven process to review the International Criminal Court and the Rome Statute system. It is important to take stock of what has been achieved, particularly through the challenges of COVID-19 pandemic, but also to reflect on the way forward. We are indebted to the group of independent experts for their thorough review and comprehensive list of recommendations delivered in September 2020, and we pay tribute to the hard work of the review mechanism, and in particular the co-chairs, Ambassador Paul van den Ijssel and Ambassador Michael Kanu, this last year, as the mechanism has categorised and allocated recommendations for assessment and, where appropriate, implementation. To its credit, the Court has engaged fulsomely and constructively in dialogue with the states parties and with other relevant stakeholders on all recommendations, and we look forward to this continued partnership and thank the Deputy Prosecutor for his presentation today and indeed his long service to the Court. As we enter into a third year of this process, we must redouble our efforts and move from review to real reform. Madam President, the group of independent experts recommended that a, quote, discussion among stakeholders should be convened on the strategic vision of the Court for the next 10 years, which will enable the Court and the ASP to focus their efforts on implementing the Rome Statute in the same direction. The Court, in its response to this recommendation, suggested, quote, such an exercise could be planned for 2023, when the Rome Statute celebrates its 25th anniversary, and sufficiently in advance for its conclusions to become a basis for the 2025-2028 strategic planning cycle of the Court. In Australia's view, there is merit in this suggestion. Consolidating on reforms achieved must be a key objective of the review process in order to set the Court on a sustainable path for its long-term future. It would also be timely. It has now been over 10 years since the 2010 Kampala Review Conference. However, for a review conference or strategic discussion to be successful, it must be underpinned by significant progress made by the Court and ASP in assessing and implementing these reform options. There is a real opportunity in the coming year to achieve that progress with the new generation of leadership in place. And we would note that the President of the Court, in his remarks at the opening, indicated that the Court stands ready to work with the ASP on this recommendation. We remain open on the timing and format of a strategic discussion or review conference, particularly with the challenges presented by the pandemic. Australia stands ready to engage in dialogue next year on how we develop a shared vision for ensuring this investment, which we have all made, now pays dividends. Madam President, for Australia's part going forward, we will continue to focus our advocacy for reform on 4 key priorities. First, the Court must better align its resources and strategic direction with its core mandate as a court of last resort that is complementary to national jurisdictions. Second, we must work together to achieve more efficient prosecutorial and judicial processes and greater accountability to the Assembly of States parties for the administration of justice. Third, the Court must strive for greater coherence and consistency in its jurisprudence. And fourth and finally, there must be a strengthening of the Court's internal culture and governance to safeguard and advance the Court's operational effectiveness and professionalism. In raising and in seeking to address these challenges, Australia continues its long-standing support of the Court and its role in pursuing accountability for the most serious crimes of international concern. That is our common endeavour. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Neuhaus, and again also for your kind words addressed to the co-chairs of the review mechanism. Next is United Kingdom, Colin Mcintyre, the legal advisor. I can't see you, Colin, but I assume you're in the hall. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you for giving me the floor. The UK remains a strong supporter of the review process. We continue to believe that reform is key to strengthening the court. The UK welcomed the independent expert report last year. This was an important moment for the Assembly and for the court. We further welcome the steps that have been undertaken this year to maintain forward momentum in that regard. We thank the review mechanism, the Assembly and the court for their work. The efforts to strengthen the court's performance are a matter of shared interest between the Assembly and the court. To achieve success will require close collaboration and continuing dialogue to tackle the problems identified in the report. Looking ahead, it is of crucial importance that the focus be on delivering practical changes, including through the implementation of key recommendations. Improving working culture and introducing policies on tenure are among the top priorities for the period ahead. The UK has recognised the case for further resources for the court this year. In doing so, we continue to stress the importance of ensuring that those resources are allocated effectively. Madam President, the review process remains a top priority for the UK. The most important work still lies ahead. Delivering real results and practical change will be critical to the future health of the court. Thank you.
I thank the UK representative for his statement and for his kind words, and also for being very short and crisp. Next is the Ambassador of Chile, Mr. Hernan Salinas. And before I give you the floor, let me also thank Chile and Poland and Bangladesh. I didn't do that explicitly, for their fantastic work they did as country focal points, helping Michael and me to stay on the right path. I hope you will continue to do that. Ambassador, please.
Señora Presidenta, en primer lugar, deseo agradecer y reconocer el liderazgo y compromiso de los embajadores Paul van den Eysel y Michael Kanu como representantes de los Estados partes en el mecanismo de revisión, apoyado por los puntos focales Bangladesh, Polonia y nuestro país, que ha tenido el honor de formar parte. Así también el valioso trabajo de la Secretaría. Con satisfacción constatamos que se ha cumplido exitosamente esta etapa para alcanzar los objetivos del mandato que se entregó en la pasada Asamblea de Estados Partes. Esto con la finalidad de fortalecer con eficiencia y eficacia el funcionamiento de la Corte y del sistema del Estatuto de Roma. Alcanzar las actividades previstas, incluyendo la presentación de una propuesta del Plan de Acción Integral para la evaluación de las 384 recomendaciones formuladas por el Grupo de Expertos Independientes, requirió un exhaustivo trabajo colectivo y coordinado con todos los actores involucrados en este proceso, Estados partes, la Corte y la sociedad civil, el cual se llevó de manera transparente e inclusiva. Nos sumamos al reconocimiento a los órganos de la Corte por su compromiso e intensa labor indispensable para llevar adelante este objetivo. Este trabajo se llevó adelante de forma estructurada, holística y orientada a la acción, categorizando las recomendaciones, asignándole prioridades y plazos para su consideración. Además, identificando aquellas que se encuentren en proceso de implementación, están ya implementadas y las que están pendientes de consideración. Sin embargo, este proceso no termina aquí. Coincidimos que el mecanismo debe proseguir coordinando la evaluación de las recomendaciones y continuar sirviendo como plataforma para su evaluación de conformidad con el Plan de Acción Integral, así como monitorear las acciones futuras y la aplicación de las recomendaciones evaluadas, como lo indica la propuesta de resolución que se aprobará en esta Asamblea. Finalmente, quiero decir que nuestro país está preparado para seguir contribuyendo a este proceso, sirviendo como punto focal del mecanismo de revisión. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, and thank you for your continued commitment. Next is the Ambassador of Mexico, José Antonio Zabagocha Treo. I can't see you, but you have the floor. Ambassador, please.
Buenas tardes. El embajador Zabalgoitia lamenta no estar aquí, pero daré su declaración en su nombre. Señora Presidenta, distinguidos delegados, funcionarios de la Corte Penal Internacional, representantes de la sociedad civil. Primeramente, México desea reconocer a los embajadores Paul van den Heysel y Michael Canu, representantes de los Estados parte en el mecanismo de revisión, por su liderazgo y arduo trabajo para avanzar en el proceso de revisión de la Corte Penal Internacional y el sistema del Estatuto de Roma. Con su esfuerzo, paciencia y dedicación, han colocado a la Corte y a los Estados parte en el camino correcto para continuar en el 2022 con la evaluación e implementación de las recomendaciones contenidas en el informe del Grupo de Expertos Independientes. Del mismo modo, México agradece la incansable labor realizada por los puntos focales de la Corte, los grupos de trabajo de la mesa y facilitaciones, los titulares de los mandatos, la sociedad civil y todos aquellos que estuvieron involucrados en este proceso. Una vez más, y a pesar de las dificultades y desafíos de la pandemia del COVID-19, nos sigue imponiendo a todos retos. Continuamos comprometidos en la lucha contra la impunidad de los crímenes más atroces que afectan a la comunidad internacional y con el proceso de revisión de la Corte y del sistema del Estatuto de Roma. Muestra de ello son los resultados obtenidos durante el 2021, en donde México participó activamente. Se logró la categorización de las recomendaciones del grupo de expertos, la elaboración del plan de acción integral y el inicio de la evaluación de numerosas recomendaciones. Si bien se registraron importantes progresos este año, aún quedan mucho por hacer en 2022. México reitera su compromiso para continuar trabajando de manera inclusiva y transparente, con el mecanismo de revisión, los Estados parte, los 3 órganos de la Corte y la sociedad civil, a fin de fortalecer el funcionamiento operativo de la CPI y del sistema del Estatuto de Roma. Sigamos construyendo consensos para dar cumplimiento a nuestro mandato compartido y al ambicioso plan de acción integral para la evaluación e implementación de las recomendaciones del grupo de expertos. Hoy es el momento de fortalecer a la Corte para lograr mejores resultados a favor de las víctimas y de las comunidades afectadas. Vamos por el camino correcto. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Madam, for your statement and for your kind words addressed to us. Next, I would like to give the floor to Belgium, Ambassador William Roland de Stappers. Ambassadeur, vous avez la parole.
Madame la Présidente, Messieurs les représentants du mécanisme d'examen, merci de me donner la parole en français, cher Paul, ça fait plaisir. La Belgique soutient le processus d'examen de la Cour pénale internationale et du statut de Rome qui est en cours et y participe activement. Comme toute institution humaine, la Cour doit pouvoir se remettre en question et mettre en œuvre les mesures utiles pour améliorer là où c'est possible son efficacité, son efficience et son effectivité. Je ne me prononcerai pas sur le contenu de recommandations ou de groupes de recommandations en particulier, mais je vais plutôt concentrer mon intervention sur des éléments de méthode et d'approche de ce processus. Il appartient à toutes les parties prenantes, à commencer par les organes de la Cour et les États parties, de prendre leur part dans cet exercice avec lucidité. À cet égard, la Belgique voudrait tout d'abord, comme l'a fait notamment l'ambassadeur d'Australie, saluer le travail important effectué à moyens constants par la Cour elle-même. Le sérieux de son engagement dans le processus d'examen a été illustré par la réponse globale de la Cour au rapport des experts indépendants, publié le 14 avril 2021, ainsi que par ses apports de grande qualité dans l'examen des recommandations des experts qui a commencé au sein du mécanisme d'examen et des diverses facilitations. La Belgique salue le travail rigoureux d'organisation et de coordination des travaux réalisés par le mécanisme d'examen, conformément au mandat qui lui a été confié par la résolution numéro 7 de la dernière Assemblée. Le travail auquel les États parties se sont eux-mêmes astreints est cependant considérable, étant donné le volume du rapport des experts indépendants et le nombre de leurs recommandations. La fixation de délais et de priorités est en soi une bonne chose, mais il en résulte un risque de prendre des décisions dans la précipitation et de manière insuffisamment préparée. Le travail intersessionnel préalable à cette session a en effet montré que les États parties avaient des difficultés à suivre le processus. La Belgique en appelle à la présidence de l'Assemblée et au Bureau pour veiller à l'association du plus grand nombre d'États dans l'examen et la décision d'actions éventuelles sur les recommandations qui leur reviennent. Par ailleurs, la Belgique souhaite insister une nouvelle fois sur la nécessité d'éviter que le processus d'examen se transforme en exercice de micro-gestion de la Cour, selon nous inacceptable dans son principe et en outre contre-productif s'il va jusqu'à distraire les organes de leur mission fondamentale qui est, rappelons-le, de rendre la justice. En particulier, nous continuerons de veiller à ce que la catégorisation des recommandations, telle qu'elle a été arrêtée en mai 2021, soit respectée. L'une des raisons d'être fondamentales de la catégorisation fut de préserver l'indépendance de la Cour et du bureau du procureur pour ce qui relève de leur ressort exclusif. Il ne saurait être question de réintroduire un interventionnisme des États dans ces domaines. En conclusion, la Belgique est satisfaite de constater que l'examen de la Cour est en marche et que bon nombre des recommandations des experts sont en cours d'examen ou déjà de mise en œuvre. Et pour finir, je voudrais peut-être réagir à la question que j'ai trouvée très intéressante qui a été posée par l'ambassadrice de Finlande au nom du groupe nordique, qui, si j'ai bien entendu, demandait ce que peuvent et doivent faire les États parties. Et c'est évidemment une question importante, et c'est vrai que le rapport des experts indépendants dit certaines choses à cet égard, mais finalement quand même un petit peu moins que sur ce qui concerne l'organisation et le fonctionnement de la Cour en tant que telle. Et donc, je dirais spontanément ce qui me tombe sous le sens, ou ce qui me vient à l'esprit, pardon, par rapport à cette question, c'est que ce que les États parties peuvent et doivent faire, c'est notamment, bien entendu, doter la Cour d'un budget pour lui permettre de fonctionner. Et je me félicite évidemment que nous soyons apparemment tout proches d'un accord dans un exercice qui a été évidemment difficile cette année, vu les augmentations demandées. La coopération des États. Vous avez assisté à la session de ce matin. Je citerai simplement le procureur. Sans la coopération des États au niveau opérationnel et judiciaire, la Cour n'est rien et ne peut rien. Le soutien politique et diplomatique constant à la Cour, et il y a des recommandations, et une en particulier, qui sont tout à fait intéressantes et importantes à cet égard. Et j'ajouterai aussi, pour ce qui relève des États parties, présenter les meilleurs candidats possibles aux fonctions électives pour les fonctions pour lesquelles des candidats doivent être présentés par les États. Je vous remercie.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur l'Ambassadeur, and also I thank you for being really interactive. So I encourage other speakers to also, if they feel, to respond to the question posed by our Finnish colleague, as we just heard from our Belgian colleague. Next speaker is Switzerland, Ambassador Nederkorn. I can't see you, but I'm sure you're there. You have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Madame la Présidente, l'examen de la Cour pénale internationale est d'importance primordiale et la Suisse soutient pleinement cet effort. Alors que la Cour a fait des dernières années face à des défis sans précédent, cet examen est une opportunité de réaffirmer que nous voulons une Cour forte, efficace et dotée de tous les moyens nécessaires pour s'acquitter de son important mandat de lutte contre l'impunité. La Suisse considère que ce processus d'examen doit être exhaustif, transparent et respectueux des compétences et de l'indépendance de la Cour. Nous constatons avec satisfaction que les discussions entamées au cours de l'année écoulée ont permis de mettre en place une dynamique favorable. À ce titre, nous saluons le travail considérable accompli par le mécanisme d'examen, par les différentes facilitations et groupes de travail de l'Assemblée des États parties et par les organes de la Cour. Nous remercions également la société civile pour son fort engagement qui a contribué à nos progrès tout au long de l'année. Notre effort commun doit se poursuivre afin d'assurer que ce processus débouche sur des gains d'efficacité substantiels de la Cour en 2022. Engageons-nous également en tant qu'État partie pour la mise en œuvre des recommandations adressées à l'Assemblée. Merci, Madame la Présidente.
I thank Ambassador Nederkorn for his statement. Next is another country focal point, and I give a great pleasure and great thanks also for her work. The floor to the representative of Poland, Pani Paulina Dudzic. Proszę bardzo, Pani.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. And again, your Polish is improving, so congratulations. Thank you. Dziękuję. Madam President, Excellencies, dear colleagues, Poland, as a member of the review mechanism at country focal point, attaches great significance to the tangible outcome of the review process. Everyone in this room shares the common goal of the review exercise, which is strengthening the Rome Statute system. However, it should come as no surprise that sometimes we differ on how to achieve this common goal. These differences, though, should not stall the progress of the review process. We have already assessed many of the IER recommendations, proving that we are able to overcome differences, but there is a lot of work ahead of us and much more difficult decisions to make. In any case, at the heart of the review process is the implementation of recommendations. We already heard on many occasions that the review process is not a box-ticking exercise. Positive assessment and even an immediate implementation of some recommendations focusing, for instance, on the working culture do not mean that we have automatically addressed the issue at stake. The review process, especially within the priority recommendations, is an ongoing commitment that requires a continued engagement on the part of the states parties and the court. We truly hope that we will be able to continue our joint efforts in the spirit of cooperation and mutual understanding, and that every implemented recommendation will actually mean a positive change for the court, not only a box ticked on paper. To conclude, I would like to reaffirm Poland's commitment and readiness to continue our work as a member of the review mechanism. And on a more personal note, if I may, I would like to sincerely thank Ambassador Van den Ijssel and Ambassador Kanu, our co-chairs of the review mechanism, for their extremely skillful leadership. This year, ambassadors, without your personal dedication and hard work, it would not have been possible to fulfill all the difficult tasks assigned to the review mechanism. I also thank my fellow at-country focal points, colleagues from Chile and Bangladesh, and of course the court focal points for excellent cooperation throughout the review process. And last but not least, I would like to also express my deep gratitude to the Secretariat for the invaluable support. Thank you so much. Dziękuję.
Dziękuję. Thank you very much for your statement and your kind words. They are duly noted. Maintenant, je voudrais donner la parole à la France. Ambassadeur Fazi, mais peut-être il n'est pas là, mais Alain, vous avez la parole.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur l'ambassadeur. Madame la présidente de l'Assemblée, messieurs les représentants du mécanisme et les représentants de la Cour, la France a été l'un des premiers États à soutenir l'idée d'un audit externe de la Cour pénale internationale en vue de renforcer son fonctionnement et d'identifier des solutions pour répondre aux défis externes et internes auxquels elle est confrontée. Nous nous sommes mobilisés pour présenter des pistes et des propositions dans une démarche constructive qui s'inspirait notamment de la déclaration de Paris sur l'efficacité de la justice pénale internationale, un document informel élaboré en 2017 par plusieurs représentants de juridictions pénales internationales et qui visait à promouvoir des mesures pour une justice plus efficace, plus rapide et plus transparente. La publication en septembre 2020 du rapport des experts indépendants nous a permis de dresser un bilan et d'obtenir des recommandations pour un renforcement du fonctionnement du système du statut de Rome. La France a soutenu la mise en place par cette Assemblée il y a un an d'un mécanisme d'examen visant à permettre des avancées concrètes, rapides et ambitieuses dans le respect de l'indépendance de la Cour. Nous nous félicitons de la progression des discussions tenues cette année permettant de progresser sur l'évaluation de certaines recommandations clés, par exemple pour accélérer le processus d'amendement du règlement de procédure et de preuve. Nous saluons aussi l'engagement de l'ensemble des organes de la Cour dans le dialogue constructif avec les États parties sur l'ensemble des recommandations, mais aussi les engagements qu'ils ont pris d'ores et déjà pour s'attaquer rapidement à certaines problématiques mises en lumière par les experts indépendants, comme celles liées à la culture de travail et au cas de harcèlement. Ces engagements devront se traduire dans les prochains mois par certaines mesures concrètes devant conduire à un réel changement. La France considère que le temps de la mise en œuvre des recommandations phares des experts indépendants est désormais venu. Ne nous y trompons pas, les organes de la Cour ont la responsabilité première de cette mise en œuvre, qui ne pourra uniquement consister en de légers ajustements, mais qui devra prendre la forme de modifications structurelles et d'ampleur pour améliorer le fonctionnement de la Cour. L'Assemblée, qui est garante de la bonne administration de cette institution, doit s'impliquer dans les directions qui seront prises pour la mise en œuvre des recommandations prioritaires et dans le contrôle de cette mise en œuvre. Il en va de la réussite de la Cour dans les prochaines années. C'est aussi une question de confiance entre la Cour et les États parties qui l'ont créée et qui la soutiennent. La France, Madame la Présidente, y prendra toute sa part. La France avait identifié quelques recommandations prioritaires conjointement avec l'Allemagne et le Royaume-Uni à l'occasion de la transmission de commentaires conjoints en juin dernier au mécanisme de suivi. Permettez-moi ici d'insister sur certains axes qui nous paraissent primordiaux pour l'avenir de la Cour et pour lesquels nous appelons tous les acteurs concernés à garantir une mise en œuvre rapide de ces recommandations pertinentes. Premièrement, sur la gouvernance de la Cour dans son ensemble, les recommandations de l'IER sur la gouvernance unifiée sont fondamentales pour l'ensemble du processus. Deuxièmement, les recommandations visant à améliorer la culture de travail et l'élimination des cas potentiels d'intimidation et de harcèlement sont prioritaires. Troisièmement, sur la gestion des ressources, l'introduction de plus de flexibilité et de transparence dans l'allocation des ressources sont des objectifs prioritaires. Le greffe, comme l'a souligné le rapport, a un rôle premier à jouer afin de garantir que les processus administratifs soient unifiés et cohérents, afin de permettre encore plus de gains d'efficience et de célérité dans le fonctionnement de la Cour. La flexibilité doit être recherchée dans la gestion des ressources humaines également, afin de permettre une rotation plus importante des personnels, des talents et l'intégration justement de nouveaux talents. Quatrièmement, le renforcement du respect et de la pratique des 2 langues de travail au sein de la Cour est un objectif prioritaire pour la France. Le multilinguisme est essentiel pour l'efficacité des enquêtes et des procédures, pour la promotion de l'universalité, pour l'équité de la procédure et le respect des droits de la défense et des victimes. Dans le même esprit, nous attendons que tous les acteurs de la Cour s'engagent pour faire réellement vivre le système hybride créé par le statut de Rome, qui est censé tirer le meilleur des 2 grandes traditions juridiques de droit romano-germanique et de la common law. Les acteurs du processus judiciaire devraient sans doute envisager de prendre inspiration sur les meilleures pratiques de leurs pairs dans un dialogue constructif, notamment dans d'autres juridictions, pour rendre notamment la jurisprudence de la Cour plus intelligible et plus accessible aux acteurs des juridictions nationales. Madame la Présidente, la mise en œuvre des recommandations prioritaires doit résulter d'un effort commun et de la bonne coordination de la Cour, des États parties et de la société civile. Comme l'a souligné l'ambassadeur d'Australie, le 20e anniversaire à venir de l'entrée en vigueur du statut de Rome constitue une occasion importante pour renforcer notre dynamique et poursuivre notre mobilisation. Vous pouvez compter sur l'engagement résolu de la France pour continuer le travail bien engagé cette année par les représentants du mécanisme et les points focaux que nous remercions vivement pour leur travail. Je vous remercie.
Merci, je vous remercie pour vos mots, madame. Maintenant, the prochain speaker, the next speaker will be the ambassador of Liechtenstein, Christian Bennewezer, and he will join us on video. I hope it works. Someone has to push. Oh, there he is.
Madam President, chairs of the review mechanism, as our foreign minister noted during the general debate yesterday, this session of the Assembly marks a moment both of opportunity and of challenge. In particular, the process initiated by the independent expert review can bring the court, state parties and civil society together in a new way that allows for constructive cooperation and results in stronger performance and overall impact of the court. Liechtenstein has helped initiate and been supportive of the independent expert review process since the beginning, which we believe should result in the court's enhanced performance. We look forward to the continuation of an exclusive process that safeguards the integrity of the Rome Statute and is carried out in close cooperation with the court and within the delineated mandates given to us as state parties and the court respectively. Indeed, we are happy to see that the court's judicial and prosecutorial independence has routinely been referenced in the operative paragraphs of the review resolution. The implementation of the recommendations from the independent expert review that fall within the exclusive competencies of the court can only be implemented by the court itself. We are aware that the independent expert review is not panacea and we must continue working on our own tracks. This applies not only to state parties but also to the court. To increase efficiency of the review process, our discussions should be focused on those recommendations directed at the ASP, while allowing the court the time and space to implement the IER recommendations directed at it and report back to this Assembly. Moreover, we will only be successful in this review effort if we also look at ourselves as state parties and agree on ways to step up our own efforts and to improve our own performance. As state parties, we must be prepared to extend full political, diplomatic, and financial support to the court to stand up against political attacks against it, and in doing so, we must show full respect for the basic principles and integrity of the Rome Statute. In particular, judicial independence, impartiality of the judges and the prosecutor, and the principle of complementarity as provided for in Article 17 of the treaty. It is also our expectation that the independent expert review and the wider review process will lead to healthier budget discussions that consider the combination of the best possible use of the ICC's resources and a more constructive approach generally taken by states to the court's budget. Madam President, chairs of the review mechanism. The Rome Statute stood the test of time and is one of the biggest achievements in the area of treaty making in the past 3 decades. The upcoming anniversary of 20 years of operations of the court is an important occasion to showcase the necessity of the ICC as the key accountability institution in the international community. And the review process will only be successful if we create a sense of common purpose, both among state parties and between state parties and the court. And there is room for significant improvement in this respect. We are ready to work towards this end and will continue to strongly support the mandate of the ICC. I thank you.
We thank you, Ambassador Wennewezer. I hope that somehow this message is conveyed to New York. Next, and I'm very pleased that they are here. That is, and just one sentence from my side. Michael and I have tried to fulfill the resolution with the most transparency and inclusiveness. Many of you have praised us for that. And I think if we discuss all these things, the Staff Union Council should be part of the discussion, as they have been in some of the discussions on the working culture. And I'm very happy to have them here. And with that having said, je voudrais donner la parole à Madame Danouy de la Staff Union Council. Vous avez la parole, Madame.
Madame la Présidente, Excellences, honorables participants, le syndicat du personnel salue l'opportunité qui lui est offerte de participer aux discussions sur la revue de la Cour. J'en profite pour remercier Monsieur l'ambassadeur Van Eyssel et Monsieur l'ambassadeur Kanou pour leur leadership dans ce processus. Dès le début de cette revue, le syndicat s'est mobilisé afin de partager le point de vue des membres du personnel de la Cour. La recommandation 20 du rapport des experts reconnaît que le syndicat peut et devrait jouer un rôle d'appui important dans le processus de renforcement de la confiance au sein de la Cour, ainsi que dans la modification de sa culture en promouvant et en appliquant une approche collaborative et coopérative. Après presque 20 ans d'existence, la Cour se trouve à un tournant en tant qu'institution. Changer la culture de travail, mettre fin à toute forme de discrimination comme le harcèlement sexuel, l'intimidation, et mettre en place des mécanismes de résolution de conflits font partie des défis qu'elle doit relever. En tant que représentante des membres du personnel, je peux vous assurer que mes collègues croient au mandat de notre Cour. Je pense que ces 2 dernières années, rythmées par la pandémie, le démontrent. Chacun d'entre nous a fait en sorte que le travail soit réalisé en temps et en heure et que les objectifs de notre Cour soient atteints. Ainsi, lorsque la Cour devra mettre en œuvre la recommandation portant sur la question de la culture de travail, il est important qu'elle n'oublie pas d'impliquer les principaux acteurs que sont les membres du personnel. Comme nous l'avons expliqué lors de nos diverses interventions, la culture organisationnelle se décrit généralement comme l'ensemble des croyances, des valeurs et des attitudes d'une organisation et comment celle-ci influence le comportement des employés. Il sera donc primordial que la Cour donne la possibilité aux membres du personnel de s'exprimer sur ce sujet et de prendre en considération leur point de vue. Le syndicat du personnel insiste aussi sur le fait que ce changement de culture doit s'inscrire dans la durée. Ce processus doit aussi s'appuyer sur une méthodologie réfléchie et adaptée. Toute précipitation risquerait de rendre cet exercice superficiel, sans bénéfice et certainement contre-productif pour notre organisation. Nous vous demandons donc, vous, États parties, ainsi que le mécanisme d'examen, d'établir des objectifs clairs, tangibles et mesurables dans le temps. Nous encourageons également l'Assemblée des États parties et les principaux de la Cour à combiner leurs efforts afin d'assurer une efficacité optimale et harmonisée au processus qui sera mis en place. Le principe d'une seule Cour doit être plus que jamais au cœur de ce projet commun. Concernant la question du harcèlement et de l'intimidation et de la mise en œuvre d'une politique de tolérance zéro, le syndicat réitère l'importance de la notion de responsabilité. Cette responsabilité doit être applicable à tout membre du personnel auteur d'un comportement inapproprié, quelle que soit sa position au sein de l'organisation. Elle devra aussi s'appliquer aux managers qui ne prendront pas les mesures adéquates à l'encontre des auteurs qui seraient sous leur supervision. En ce sens, il devient crucial que la Cour adopte un système de gestion des conflits formels et informels performant dans lequel les membres du personnel auraient toute confiance. Un système qui permettrait aussi de résoudre en amont tout conflit en utilisant peut-être des outils de médiation ou autres. Sur toutes ces questions, le syndicat propose de travailler en partenariat avec la Cour, l'Assemblée des États parties et le mécanisme d'examen. Il est temps que notre institution, au tournant de son existence, prenne le virage nécessaire pour se mettre au niveau de l'excellence qu'elle prône. Merci pour votre attention.
Merci, madame. Je vous remercie pour votre contribution. I couldn't see you. I don't know where you spoke from, but I heard you loud and clear, and I'm sure all the delegates did. Ah, voilà. It's not just my eyesight, it's a big hole. Next is the representative of the Coalition for the ICC, and we will have two speakers from civil society. She will be followed by Human Rights Watch. Of course, the civil society is an important player in the review process, so we're happy to have them here, and I'm happy to give the floor to Mrs. Dorine Lanta of the Coalition for the ICC. You have the floor, madam.
Oh. Thank you very much, Ambassador. Excellencies, in an effort to coordinate civil society around the complex and overwhelming review process, the Coalition for the ICC set up a dedicated review team co-led by Human Rights Watch and my organization, the International Federation for Human Rights. Today, I have the honor to address the review mechanism and the Assembly of State Parties on behalf of the team. We welcome this dedicated plenary session on the review, and more broadly, the transparent and inclusive approach taken by the review mechanism reflected in the resolution, allowing for a greater engagement from all stakeholders. However, as we move on to the assessment in 2022 of recommendations touching upon key priorities to civil society, we believe that improvements can still be made to ensure our early, meaningful, and genuine engagement through accessible platforms, including civil society representatives and human rights defenders from situation countries. As you most certainly know, the latter can provide unique and invaluable perspectives, have worked directly with victims and affected communities for many years, and have experienced firsthand the ICC's work, including the effects of shortcomings in the court's performance. The CICC review team and its members have identified several key priorities, reflecting areas of long-standing interest and concern, many of which are slotted for assessment next year. These include gender equality and the need of safe, respectful, and effective workplace conduct, the guarantee of the highest standards of fair trial and completion of the legal aid policy, states-party cooperation with the court, particularly in the face of politicized attack, merit-based nominations and elections of highly qualified court officials, improved and strengthened methodologies of the Office of the Prosecutor, adequate and sufficient resources to carry out the court's mandate consistent with its workload, as well as all the recommendations aiming at placing victims and affected communities at the heart of ICC proceedings and at ensuring the respect of their rights, including early and direct engagement with these victims and affected communities, better outreach and public information strategies, increased field presence, and meaningful participation, including through chosen and effective representation during all stages of the proceedings. We would also like to remind that while states parties play an important role to encourage, support, and ensure changes at the ICC, it is imperative that the court, acting in compliance with the Rome Statute, remains the ultimate decision maker on issues under its purview that go to the heart of its judicial and prosecutorial independence, as raised today by several state parties. The CICC and the review team and its members stand ready to continue our engagement in the process and offer our assistance to the Assembly and to the Court to ensure genuine engagement by our members in this critical process. We are looking forward to upcoming opportunities to meaningfully discuss the recommendations and to all together engage on the strategic vision for the Court for the next 10 years, as suggested in Recommendation 363. Thank you very much for your attention.
I thank you, Ms. Lanta, and the Coalition for the ICC for your words and for your commitment to the process. Now we're going to look to a video statement again by Human Rights Watch, Madame Esti Tambay.
Je vous remercie de me donner cette occasion de m'adresser à la plénière sur l'examen de la Cour pénale internationale au nom de Human Rights Watch. Nous saluons l'engagement des États parties et de la Cour pour mener à bien le processus d'examen des experts indépendants. La Cour reste indispensable. Nous apprécions l'assistance de nombreux États parties pendant ce processus sur le besoin de respecter l'indépendance de la Cour. Les États parties devraient continuer à rappeler ce principe important et à cette fin, insister sur des garanties nécessaires dans les discussions de l'Assemblée. Cela devrait également inclure une approche prudente dans les discussions liées à la gouvernance dans le cadre du rôle de l'Assemblée. Pour accélérer les avancées de discussion l'année prochaine, nous demandons aux États parties de se concentrer sur les recommandations des experts attribuées à l'Assemblée et qui concernent les responsabilités essentielles des États parties, y compris celles liées à la coopération. Nous félicitons l'accent mis sur la transparence dans le mécanisme de l'examen. Nous attendons dans la Cour qu'elle s'engage à une plus grande consultation des groupes de la société civile dans son évaluation des recommandations qui lui sont attribuées. Les groupes de la société civile disposent d'une expérience vécue et d'une réelle expertise sur le travail de la Cour. Enfin, nous vous demandons de prêter attention à la recommandation 363, qui appelle à une tenue d'une conférence des parties prenantes sur une vision stratégique de la Cour pour les 10 prochaines années, dans le but de trouver un accord commun sur le niveau d'activité de la Cour et les ressources nécessaires pour y parvenir. L'Assemblée devrait convoquer cette conférence à l'occasion du 25e anniversaire du statut de Rome, en se focalisant sur la nécessité d'investir davantage dans la justice internationale. Nous appelons à une action rapide l'année prochaine afin de désigner des points focaux pour préparer cette discussion. Je vous remercie.
Je vous remercie, Madame le représentant de Human Rights Watch. That exhausts our speaker list, not the speakers, because we already have one delegation that want to say something. But before I give the floor, it's Uganda. Before I give the floor to Uganda, I say we've heard now 13 statements, and the floor is now open for everyone who wants to have a further comment or a question or react to another speaker. You know how the system works. You just push a button. People who are following this debate from far away, perhaps they can send, if they want, a comment or a question to the mail address, which was mentioned, I think, in the note preceding this meeting. So on that note, I'll give the floor to the delegation of Uganda. You have the floor, sir or madam. I don't know who's going to speak. It's a sir. Sorry, you have the floor.
Yeah, the last time I checked. Madam President, first I would like to align myself with the statement of Ivory Coast on behalf of the African group. Rather, the statement of Ivory Coast on behalf of the African group of states parties. I would like to commend you and your co-facilitator, Ambassador Kanu, on the way you have achieved progress thus far. My delegation would like to see as part of the reform process the requirement that staff recruitment should be reserved for professionals from states parties. For avoidance of all doubt, no staff recruitment should be open to job seekers from non-states parties. And I say job seekers from a well-positioned vantage point. If we have job holders from non-states parties, they do not share the passion or the views that are held by states parties. My delegation would also like to advise that part of the review process should provide that all elections should be held at the United Nations headquarters in New York, where there is full representation of all states parties. This, we believe, would further strengthen the court in its mandate to end impunity for the perpetrators of the most serious crimes of concern to the international community. Nothing beats full participation when it comes to populating the positions, whether in the elective capacity, like judges and prosecutors and deputy prosecutors, but also the recruitment of people who service those positions in their various capacities, because they have a lot of influence on the office holders that they service. I thank you.
I thank the delegate of Uganda for his statement and his questions. I'm looking around if there are more. I see the hands of Germany raised. Yeah, if I don't want to anyone to break jump any queue, but I think Germany is at the moment the one asking for. So, bitte Jan, das Wort. You have the floor. You have to push the button, yeah? That's.
Jetzt. Hartelijk dank, meneer de chair, and thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone. I will be very brief. I just wanted to add to the audience that Germany from day one has been very actively involved and interested in the review process. We attach great importance to this process and trust that it will make the court even more effective and efficient as it is today. As my French colleague Alain had mentioned a moment ago, the UK, France and Germany had sent a document to the review mechanism with points that we believe are very important, and certainly I want to repeat those. And I'd like to conclude by thanking you, Ambassador, and Ambassador Kanu, and your very able co-focal points for the tremendous and sometimes very not really thankful work with providing matrices and very many documents. So this is greatly appreciated. Thank you very much.
Danke. Thank you. I'm looking around. Is there anyone else who would, by pushing the button preferably, but I think we have exhausted. There were many statements. They contained many elements. We heard some questions. So we're going to conclude this debate by first asking our president to respond. Maybe she is in a position that she can already respond to one or two questions, but at least her impressions of the debate. So, Madam President, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Ambassador and distinguished representatives. And indeed, I am indeed grateful for the opportunity that I have had to participate in this plenary discussion on the review mechanism, which is significant on so many fronts. As I said at the beginning of this plenary, this is indeed a top priority for us. And as you said, Ambassador, it is indeed a subject that it is very close and dear to me personally. And I thank the review mechanism for having had the insight to hold this plenary session open to all stakeholders, and it has been the exercise throughout this year. And thank you for encouraging an interactive dialogue. I would like to once more underline the crucial importance of this exercise and the importance of concluding this exercise in a timely manner. We need to ensure that we complete the assessment and of the recommendations, and that we also engage in an active follow-up and implementation of this assessment. The implementation is key. Many of you have referred to the importance of implementation, and indeed I see that we are well on the way towards implementation, which will be indeed the next step, thanks to the roadmap set out by the review mechanism in the comprehensive action plan. Now, I have to say that there is no doubt that the review is an ambitious exercise. And I recognize, as many of you have, that this imposes quite a burden. That is on state parties, in particular the ASP mandate holders, but as well as on the court, taking into account the short timelines of Resolution 7 and the request for reports and discussions. Nevertheless, I would like to stress that it is indeed important for us to keep the momentum in order to achieve the goals of the review of the court and the system in a timely manner. As you said, Ambassador van den Eyssel, the timetable is indeed ambitious, but we need to stick to it. Now, many of you have highlighted today that the review gives us a unique opportunity to strengthen the court and the Rome Statute system. This is the goal of the exercise. So let us seize this momentum at this juncture in the life of the court. We are two decades after the entry into force of the treaty, and in 2023, we will be celebrating the 25th anniversary of the adoption of the Rome Statute. So this is indeed a crucial moment and a very good moment to embark in this reflection. And I have noted, I've taken due note of the opportunity to reflect, and you have mentioned this, some of you, on that also this gives us an opportunity to reflect on our vision for the system for the next 10 years. This is important. This is something that we indeed need to consider at the Bureau and the Presidency, but I have taken due note of what you have said in this regard. I would also like to say that in order to succeed in this review exercise, we, all stakeholders, need to approach the exercise in a constructive manner. While we may not all agree on each and every recommendation, we all need to engage with each other in a constructive way and without distrust. All of us, state parties, the court, and civil society, have a stake in this exercise. We are all responsible for improving the system, and we cannot fail in this important task. This is simply not an option. This exercise is not only about the work of the court. It is about our own work and our own responsibilities at the Assembly. This project is indeed about a holistic review of the Rome Statute system as a whole. So let us seize the opportunity to strengthen the court and to make it a stronger and improved judicial institution in a strengthened system. In closing, let me once again thank you all the members of the review mechanism and the court focal points for their extraordinary efforts in ensuring a constructive and transparent dialogue among all. I wish you every success as you continue to lead us in this extremely important exercise. We share all this goal together. Thank you very much for your attention and for those important contributions to the debate.
I thank you very much, Madam President. We are about to conclude. According to the script, we got the review mechanism as the final word. So, Michael, please.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Ambassador van der Ijssel. Thank you, Madam President, for your very kind words, inspiring words, and also for state parties. I'll just go to the closing because of the time, but to note that we think that the question from Finland is very important on behalf of the Nordic group. And I think we've all said the words which we need to say, including from the Madam President. Let us collaborate, let us be a bit more trusting, let us devote some time to the review process since it is an ambitious process. So on behalf of the review mechanism, we thank you all for your active participation in today's meeting. We are really appreciative of your direct interaction with us and with the court focal point. This has given us a deeper appreciation of where the different stakeholders stand in relation to the work of the review process. And we wish to assure you that we will very much keep in mind what you have expressed today and the messages that we've received as we move forward with our mandate in the coming year. Thank you, this concludes the work for this plenary. We will give the floor back to Madam President. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you again for this segment of our plenary today. And before we resume the general debate that some representatives are still pending of giving us their remarks, and I will invite Vice President Sequencova to chair on that part of the debate. But before we go into this segment, I would like to return to another item that it is in fact closely related to the review mechanism and the efforts to strengthen the court. I would like to refer to the election of non-candidates of the Advisory Committee on Nominations. As you may remember, on our first day, we deferred the election for this body because we needed to continue conversations in order to find consensus in accordance with the relevant rules. I have to say, unfortunately, despite all efforts, we have not yet reached consensus regarding all 9 candidates. Discussions continue, conversations continue regarding one of the 9 candidates. So I would like to take this opportunity to inform you all of what is going on at this moment with relation to this item of the agenda, but also I would like to take this opportunity to really urge the states involved in this conversation to approach this matter in a constructive and flexible manner, taking into account the importance of the Advisory Committee on Nominations, indeed to strengthen the Rome Statute system. The ICN is indeed an extremely important aspect, an important component in the life of this court. The experts, the independent experts have made a recommendation in this regard, more specifically recommendation 380, which will allow us to discuss and decide collectively on what are the required conditions or requirements of each one of the candidates. So I hope that we can find a solution in order to proceed to this election this week. I hope to be able to invite you to return to this item tomorrow. I trust that with the assistance of you all, we will be able to find a necessary consensus to proceed to elect these 9 candidates this week, hopefully tomorrow. I thank you very much for your attention, and now we will revert to the general debate. We will adjourn for a few minutes, and then we will proceed with the general debate.
Distinguished representatives, we will now proceed with continuation of the agenda item 8, general debate, and we will continue with the remaining statements. Let us proceed immediately with our first speaker, Her Excellency Mrs. José Mutombo Kise, Minister of State, Minister of Justice and Garde des Sceaux of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Monsieur le procureur, Monsieur le greffier, Mesdames et Messieurs les représentantes et représentants de la société civile. C'est un honneur pour moi de représenter devant vous, devant l'Assemblée des États partis au statut de Rome, mon pays, la République démocratique du Congo. La Cour pénale internationale est porteuse des idéaux de justice et de paix. Elle en est la concrétisation et joue un rôle premier pour mettre fin à l'impunité des auteurs de crimes de masse. La République démocratique du Congo adhère pleinement à ces objectifs et les soutient sans faiblir. Nous avons été le premier État à déférer à la Cour la situation qui touchait notre pays. La Cour était alors à peine née et n'était encore saisie d'aucune affaire. La RDC n'a pourtant pas hésité. Nous nous sommes engagés à coopérer et l'avons fait pleinement. La première enquête de la Cour a eu lieu sur nos terres. Ces premiers procès ont concerné nos nationaux qui ont été jugés par votre Cour pour crimes contre l'humanité et crimes de guerre. La RDC ne s'est pas contentée d'en appeler à la justice internationale. Elle a également déployé elle-même sa justice nationale pour juger des crimes commis sur son territoire. Les cours militaires congolaises ont rendu de nombreux jugements pour crimes contre l'humanité et crimes de guerre. Ceux-ci ont fait application directe du statut de la Cour, comme les y autorise la Constitution de la RDC, et offert un bel exemple de complémentarité entre juridictions internationales et nationales. Notre volonté de justice est réelle. Notre volonté de justice est vivante, ancrée à jamais dans la chaîne du peuple congolais. Ce désir de justice nous réclame d'agir sans cesse afin de ne pas laisser retomber l'élan né de la création de votre Cour, de notre Cour. La RDC entend s'investir pleinement en tant que soutien de la Cour pénale internationale. Elle va développer son point focal national et travailler à renforcer encore la coopération avec la Cour ainsi qu'avec le Fonds au profit des victimes. Au l'aube d'un nouveau chapitre pour la Cour pénale internationale, la RDC félicite chaleureusement le nouveau procureur pour son élection. Nous nous réjouissons de l'ouverture de nouvelles enquêtes qui élargissent les champs d'action de la Cour. Nous remercions chaleureusement le Fonds au profit des victimes pour l'aide et l'assistance qu'il leur a apportée, particulièrement en RDC. C'est en ami de la Cour que la RDC soutient une conception universelle de la justice pénale internationale, mettre fin à l'impunité des auteurs des crimes de masse, faire émerger la vérité judiciaire et permettre aux victimes reconnaissance et réparation. Une justice qui s'applique aux forts comme aux faibles, pour se garder que les mots cinglants de la célèbre fable ne reviennent nous interpeller, que vous soyez puissants ou misérables, les jugements de la Cour vous rendront blanc ou noir. Très récemment encore, l'accusation a choisi d'écarter certains aspects de ces enquêtes au motif de ressources limitées, épargnant à certains ressortissants d'avoir à craindre l'action de la justice internationale. La RDC regrette profondément. La parole de l'ami est bienveillante, elle doit être entendue. Si la Cour est confrontée à des obstacles, il nous faut nous remettre à l'ouvrage, persévérer dans la défense de la Cour et agir inlassablement pour la renforcer. La RDC soutient en ce sens les propositions du rapport des experts indépendants quant à l'examen de la Cour ainsi que les procédures d'audit interne. La Cour se doit de travailler dans un environnement sain et non conflictuel. La RDC appelle également à plus de célérité dans les procédures de la Cour. Faut-il le rappeler, la première affaire, une affaire congolaise, l'affaire Lubanga, n'est toujours pas achevée. La Cour vient tout juste d'accepter la mise en place de programmes de réparation collective. Les victimes n'en ont pas encore perçu les bénéfices. Le condamné, lui, a fini de purger sa peine et a recouvré sa liberté. Notre compatriote, le docteur Mukwege, prix Nobel de la paix, a entrepris de réparer les corps de femmes victimes de viols massifs en RDC, opérant les victimes et réparant ce que, je le cite, même un œil de chirurgien ne peut pas s'habituer de voir. La justice internationale doit continuer sans cesser d'apporter sa pierre à l'édifice de la réparation aux victimes. Parce qu'il faut de réparer les corps, telle la médecine, le droit répare les esprits. Il restaure les droits des victimes et participe au maintien de la paix. Comment construire la paix sans vérité ni réparation? Il n'y a pas de paix sans justice. Je vous remercie de votre aimable attention.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for your statement. We will now continue with the remaining statements by the non-governmental organizations. I give the floor to Ms. Gizu Jahangari from International Federation for Human Rights. You have the floor.
Excellencies, it is my pleasure to address you as Vice President of the International Federation for Human Rights, FIDH, 192 NGOs from 117 countries, including my organization, Open Asia Arman Shah, working in Afghanistan. I'm a feminist, and over the past 29 years have been working for Afghanistan, where permanent war takes a massive toll on its population. We have conducted work related to the ICC mandate, reaching out to victims, in particular women, often at great risk. Last year, a colleague was killed one day after a meeting in our office. This August of withdrawal of the US troops, we had to evacuate staff, many of them still in the country. We have lost the capacity of people working to strengthen accountability for international crimes. We had to destroy all documents. We have lost the work of a lifetime. During this, the ICC has remained largely absent. We welcome the OTP's opening of the investigation in Afghanistan, but are concerned that the prosecutor narrowed the investigation, excluding some alleged perpetrators. In the words of the pre-trial chamber, a proper investigation should focus first on crimes and then on identifying who the responsible persons of those crimes are. Accountability for international crimes in Afghanistan is a missing link. We call on states parties to effectively cooperate with the court and press for solutions to protect critical information before it's too late. FIDH is also concerned about the court's limited financial resources for proper investigations and prosecutions, for outreach to survivors, victims, and affected communities, and to conduct adequate, localized public information about matters that affect their rights. In situations like Afghanistan, where the risks for human rights defenders are high, a dialogue between all stakeholders is crucial. I encourage the ASP to press for the implementation of recommendations by the independent expert review. We need a dialogue beyond mere formalities, genuine consultations that take into account the realities of situation countries. Victims deserve justice.
I thank you for the statement, and now I give the floor to Ms. Garciela Rodriguez on behalf of the Comisión Mexicana de Defensa y Promoción de Derechos Humanos. You have the floor.
Distinguished delegates and members of the International Criminal Court, the Mexican Commission for the Defense and Promotion of Human Rights, along with other civil society organizations, have long submitted communications to the Office of the Prosecutor on the commission of international crimes in Mexico in the context of the so-called war on drugs. Since the armed forces participate in public security operations, the number of these crimes has significantly increased and includes alarming numbers of murders, torture, sexual violence, arbitrary detention, and enforced disappearances committed both by state and non-state actors, sometimes acting in collusion. These conducts have been perpetrated in a generalized and systematic manner against civilians, in furtherance of a policy of demonstrating the effectiveness of the war on drugs, which enables the commission of these crimes and lacks the intention to hold perpetrators accountable. The generalized nature of torture and enforced disappearances has been confirmed at an international level. In 2015, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Torture affirmed that torture and ill treatment occur in Mexico in a generalized manner and in a context of impunity. Last month, the Committee on Enforced Disappearances visited Mexico and regretted to confirm that within an alarming context of 95,121 victims nationwide, a generalized situation of disappearances continues in large parts of the country, re-victimization prevails, and impunity is almost absolute. In our most recent communication to the OTP, we, along with the International Federation of Human Rights, provided sufficient elements to prove the existence of crimes against humanity in Mexico between 2006 and 2018 concerning torture perpetrated by elements of the federal forces. This submission documents cases referring to 642 per-person's torture in Mexico committed in the context of the progressive militarization of the country, making it possible for military elements to take charge of public security. Moreover, the Mexican Commission has also documented the commission of extrajudicial killings and other crimes committed in the context of non-international armed conflicts within Mexican territory in the same period. Thus, we submitted in June a communication to the OTP on the criminal patterns of killings committed by Mexican federal forces, which enjoy complete impunity due to the unwillingness and lack of capacity of the state to investigate or prosecute their members. To date, despite the systematicity of these crimes, we are not aware of any relevant convictions. Given the alarming levels of impunity, we are certain that the Mexican government has long been unwilling or unable to investigate and prosecute perpetrators, especially members of the armed forces. Succinctly put, Crimes against humanity and war crimes are being and have been perpetrated in Mexico, and we believe that the involvement of the ICC would be crucial to elicit an appropriate governmental response to generalized impunity. In this sense, we call on states to ensure the ICC has the necessary resources to move forward with preliminary examinations, especially in situations where, as in the case of Mexico, there is a clear lack of will and capacity on the part of the state to investigate and prosecute those most responsible for committing international crimes.
I thank you for your statement. I now give the floor to Mr. Ahmed Abouful on behalf of Al-Haq, the Palestinian Center for Human Rights. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Vice President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure to address you today on behalf of the following Palestinian human rights organizations: Al-Haq Organization, the Palestinian Center for Human Rights, and Al-Mizan Center for Human Rights. As you are all aware, 6 Palestinian civil society organizations have recently been designated as terrorist organizations by the occupying Israeli authorities. The decision to label our organizations as terrorist is the culmination of years-long orchestrated campaign that aims at silencing human rights defenders. The tactics used include several intimidation and harassment methods, such as smearing campaigns, attempts to try financial resources, targeting with notorious Pegasus spyware, and even death threats. This is primarily because of our long-lasting constructive engagement with the ICC. Former prosecutor Bensouda acknowledged in her 2016 report on primary examination the following, and I quote, "State members of certain organizations that have gathered information of relevance to the Office of the Prosecutor's primary examination, such as Al-Haq and Al-Mizan, have been subjected to threats and other apparent acts of intimidation and interference." End of quote. Israel systematically denies international access to the occupied Palestinian territory, including UN special rapporteurs and fact-finding missions and commission of inquiries. As a result, the only access the international community and the relevant investigative bodies, including the ICC, have to the requisite documentation of the international crimes allegedly committed in the situation in Palestine is through our organizations. Israel's targeting of our organizations aspires to hinder the work of the ICC by depriving it of one of its main sources of information, evidence, and supporting analysis. Our organizations have been submitting vital communications to the Office of the Prosecutor. Our organizations have also played a pivotal role in advocating for the State of Palestine's accession to the Rome Statute. Excellencies, the Apartheid Convention lists persecution of organizations and persons by depriving them of fundamental rights and freedoms because they oppose apartheid as one of the inhumane acts of apartheid. Israel's unsubstantiated designations are a clear attempt by an apartheid regime to conceal its crimes and to prevent the ICC from acquiring information and evidence that have been collected by our organizations. Such acts of tampering with or interfering with the collection of evidence when at trial stage, for example, amount to offenses against the administration of justice, as stipulated by the rules of the Rome Statute. We therefore urge the Office of the Prosecutor to expedite its investigation in the situation in Palestine, including the evident crimes against humanity of apartheid and persecution. In addition, the Assembly of State Party has a unique responsibility to address this matter. State parties must swiftly and decisively protect human rights defenders in Palestine. This Assembly and its state parties must boldly and unequivocally condemn Israel's designations. The bizarre silence of this Assembly and its state parties in this situation sends a very unfavorable message to other civil society organizations working actively on the ground, especially in situations to which the ICC have no access. Excellencies, if colonial occupying powers will be allowed to interfere, influence, and even outlaw human rights organizations, then we can only envisage a very dystopian future ahead of the human rights movement as a whole, in which victims will be abandoned, impunity will prevail, and justice will be denied, and the ICC itself may be rendered irrelevant. Together, we must make it the purpose of our lives to prevent such an outcome. Excellencies, Palestinian victims have placed their hopes and trust in us to make their voices heard, and we will stay the course, undeterred. Thank you so much for your kind attention.
I thank you for your statement, and now I give the floor to Mr. Serge Gabriel on behalf of the Ligue pour la paix, les droits de l'homme et la justice. You have the floor.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, dear colleagues and friends, I am Nadia Volkova from Ukrainian Legal Advisory Group, and I am deeply honored to make this address today on behalf of Ukrainian NGOs, Crimean Human Rights Group, Media Initiative for Human Rights, Truth Hounds, Dear Human Rights Center, Human Rights Centers MENA, and Ukraine.
Clearly, we got the wrong video, so just please bear with me for a second.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the League for Peace, Human Rights and Justice, LIPADOJ, a member of the Coalition for the ICC, has been accompanying the ICC in its objective of a fair and effective court in the fight against impunity since 2006. It is especially interested in the situation of the victims and affected communities with whom it lives and understands better. This allows it to be always very attentive and watchful on all the issues that affect the rights of victims and affected communities. It is in this context that in our observation addressed to the ICC, pursuant to the Chamber's July 16, 2006 order, under Rule 103 of the Rules of Procedure and Evidence, the issue of reparation has taken pride of place. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, at present, the reparation in the Republic Democratic of Congo, the country of the first ICC cases, suffer from a lack of sufficient staff to serve the fund for the benefit of victims. The lack of resources that meet the expectation of victims and affected communities, and the lack of sufficient number of fund partners to implement the reparation project and assistance program. This situation significantly diminished the trust of victims and affected community in the work of the ICC, so that out of desperation, they join the camp of violence. In addition, there is the ever-increasing insecurity with a long list of new victims of international crime, as if the ICC has never intervened in this part of the country, especially in Ituri and North Kivu. These challenges are the result of serious problems with the operating resources allocated to the ICC, which do not keep up with its ever-increasing responsibilities. Thus, for a better visibility and especially for more efficiency and credibility to the ICC's action for the benefit of victims and affected communities, we invite the Assembly and all its state parties to strengthen its support to the ICC in these first experiences of reparation in the Democratic Republic of Congo by providing sufficient means to support the fund in its program. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the statement on behalf of the League for Peace, Human Rights and Justice, made by Dr. Sergio, the Director of Legal Affairs. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for your statement. Now I give the floor to Mr. David Donat-Katin from the Parliamentarians for Global Actions. You have the floor, sir.
Madam Deputy President, representatives of the Court, distinguished representatives of states and non-governmental organizations, Madam Minister of Justice of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, dear friends and colleagues. It is an enormous privilege and honor for Parliamentarians for Global Action, the largest organization of individual lawmakers from over 130 countries and 1,100 members in all regions of the world, to address these 20 Assembly of State Parties to the Rome Statute of the ICC. The Rome Statute is a treaty that our organization started to promote as an idea in 1989 to mark a new era after the Cold War that should have been characterized by the globalization of justice, human rights, and the rule of law. PGA today renews its absolute commitment to the object and purpose of the Rome Statute, namely to put an end to impunity for the most serious crimes. In particular, PGA undertakes to continue to carry out concrete action for the universality of the Rome Statute, and yesterday we heard the testimonies of 3 parliamentarians from Malaysia, Ukraine, and Jamaica addressing a side event that we organize towards ratification. The effective implementation of the principle of complementarity, the effective application of the obligation of cooperation, and the protection of integrity of the Rome Statute, including protection of the independence and impartiality of the court principals organs. In this respect, PGA supports a reform of the procedures for the nomination of ICC judicial candidates at the national level, in line with the recommendations contained in Chapter 20 of the Independent Expert Review Report. PGA notes with great concern paragraph 29 of the ASP report on the election of the judges, which postpones relevant action by this ASP to 2022. Therefore, we believe that it is in the best interest for the ICC and state parties to agree next year on binding criteria for a uniform procedure at the national level to ensure that the best possible nominees are emerging and that the current practice of politically nominated candidates be altered. While the national laws of most state parties allows for the political appointment of certain judges to the highest judicial institutions, the Rome Statute does not preclude that states create transparent, public and merit-based procedures to select the most qualified judicial candidates as nominees. This is a necessary reform that the ASP is called to undertake by the end of next year. Since the first ASP in 2002, PGA has consistently recognized the need to support for the ICC as a centerpiece of the Rome Statute system against impunity. In this respect, budgetary needs must be met as the court increases the effectiveness and efficiencies in delivering more cases in the situations falling under the court jurisdiction. Therefore, the budget of the ICC must be driven by the imperative to address atrocity crimes waves and must adapt to the needs. States shall never use the limitations to the budget as a tool to control or curb the court activities. The Rome Statute creates a criminal court which applies international law under Article 21 of the statute and functions within the shell of an international organization. But while the budgetary needs of an international organization are predictable and relatively modest, the budgetary needs of a criminal jurisdiction, which is also created by the Rome Statute, are not entirely predictable and may be rather significant, even if incomparably smaller of the budgetary resources absorbed by the security sectors or other areas in our societies. The ICC budget process must be reformed to reflect this reality, so to upgrade the ICC and align it with the needs of the fight against impunity worldwide. A final point that I would like to make today is that we believe that it's very important to learn the lessons from the failures of domestic and international criminal justice in concrete situations. For example, how is it possible, we ask, and our members are asking, that no case on crimes against humanity allegedly occurred in Afghanistan was initiated before any Afghan court or before the ICC, since the Rome Statute was ratified by Afghanistan in February 2003? Impunity in Afghanistan led to new atrocity crimes, and now the Taliban are back in power. They are the de facto regime ruling over Afghanistan. The international community failed to ensure the respect of international law, including international criminal law, in 20 years of intense intervention in Afghan territory. Counter-terrorism prevailed over the need to bring to justice those responsible of crimes against humanity and other crimes under international law, including leaders of the Taliban and certain leaders, also known as the warlords, of the Afghan state, whose subordinates refused to fight when they had to defend their country in the recent war and following the Doha peace agreements, which were repeatedly breached by the Taliban. PGA calls upon the ICC and its Assembly of State Parties, which includes Afghanistan, to engage in a lesson-learned exercise concerning interferences and external pressures that might have hampered the respect of the Rome Statute concerning the Afghanistan situation, with the view to take measures that would impede the repetition of the same mistakes or failures in the future in other situations falling under the court jurisdiction. Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson.
I thank you very much for your statement. I now give the floor to Ms. Nadia Volkova, Ukrainian Legal Advisory Group, Crimea Human Rights Group, Media Initiative for Human Rights, Truth Hound, Daya Human Rights Center, and Human Rights Center Zmina. You have the floor.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, dear colleagues and friends, I am Nadia Volkova from Ukrainian Legal Advisory Group, and I am deeply honored to make this address today on behalf of Ukrainian NGOs, Crimean Human Rights Group, Media Initiative for Human Rights, Truth Hounds, Dear Human Rights Center, Human Rights Center Zmina, and Ukrainian Legal Advisory Group, for whom justice and accountability for grave crimes have been at the forefront of their movement ever since the Revolution of Dignity took place in 2013, followed by the breakout of armed conflict in Crimea and armed hostilities in eastern Ukraine in 2014, which are still ongoing. Following the decision of the then prosecutor of the ICC, Fatou Bensouda, to conclude the preliminary examination in the situation of Ukraine as statutory criteria for opening of investigation had been met, due to the number of factors, including existing budgetary constraints, the submitting of the request for authorization for opening of investigation had been postponed until further notice and left to be made by the recently elected prosecutor Karim Khan. The decision was confusing to many, but most of all to the victims, civil society and domestic authorities, because the existing challenges are too great for the domestic system alone, and without the catalytic effect of the ICC investigation, there is a risk that international justice will be further deprioritized. While we are mindful of the existing challenges faced by the court, it is imperative that the office continues to actively engage with all the stakeholders and to put pressure on them in order to ensure that principle of complementarity is unequivocally adhered to by the state of Ukraine, bearing in mind that any further delays in opening of the investigation will further challenge the ICC's ability to fulfill its mandate in relation to Ukraine and will add to further disillusionment in its effectiveness. Excellencies, Ukraine has homework which it has consistently failed to do for many years now, to ratify and implement the Rome Statute, and not for the lack of active campaigning on the part of victims and civil society in all the possible fora. While Ukraine fails to factor in justice and accountability as an effective deterrent to further escalation and spread of the ongoing war, it is very dependent on the support of the international community in tackling consequences of armed conflict. Therefore, we call on the international community to make a consistent and consolidated effort to put pressure on Ukraine's officials, in particular the President of Ukraine, to sign Draft IHL Implementation Bill 2689, to initiate the ratification of the Rome Statute process, and to conclude the Memorandum of Understanding between Ukraine and the ICC as soon as possible. We, in turn, would like to reassure you of our commitment and continued cooperation in promoting peace, justice, and ending of impunity. We thank you for your attention.
I thank you for your statement. I now give the floor to Ms. Cathy Olivia van Tergo on behalf of the Stop Ecocide Foundation. You have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, Madam Chair, Stop Ecocide Foundation would like to begin by acknowledging the dedicated work of all those involved in the review and reforms taking place at the court. We trust and believe that the court will emerge stronger from this important internal process. Ladies and gentlemen, the court's remit is to deal with crimes which most threaten the peace, security, and well-being of the world. Our global community faces twin threats at this time, threats that can call for urgent action. They are interlinked threats of climate change and biodiversity loss, at levels so serious that the recent IPCC report describes changes already set in motion, such as sea level rise, will be irreversible in the coming centuries. The report also noted that the internationally agreed threshold of global heating, 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels, is dangerously close. But these are not naturally occurring threats or changes. They share a key root cause in the mass damage and destruction of ecosystems, now increasingly being named for the crime it is, the crime of ecocide. 2 years ago, at the 18th session of the Assembly of State Parties, two of the most climate vulnerable countries in the world, Vanuatu and the Maldives, had the courage to call for the serious consideration of including this crime under the Rome Statute. At last year's ASP, Belgium concurred, declaring, and I quote, "It would be useful to examine the possibility of introducing crimes known as ecocide into the Rome Statute system." Ladies and gentlemen, in direct response to growing diplomatic and political interest, our foundation last year convened an independent expert panel of 12 renowned international criminal and environmental lawyers from around the world. Their remit was to draft a clear and robust legal definition of ecocide as a fifth international crime. The expert panel reached consensus in June this year. The resulting text is concise, balanced, and strongly based on precedent. It may, we trust, serve as a useful draft for state parties of this Assembly to consider. The core text is this, and I quote, "Ecocide means unlawful or wanton acts committed with knowledge that there is a substantial likelihood of severe and either widespread or long-term damage to the environment being caused by those acts." The text has been well received in the political world. Parliamentary or government-level discussion to criminalize ecocide is now on public record in at least 17 of the ICC state parties. Just last week, the Belgian Parliament passed a resolution by an overwhelming majority calling on its government to propose recognition of ecocide here at the ICC. There is a broad and significant civil society support for recognizing this crime internationally, from the Global Citizens Assembly to faith leaders, Pope Francis and Patriarch Bartholomeus, from the Indigenous Alliance of Mother Nature's Guardians to the youth movement, Fridays for Future. It is an explicit demand. A recent statement from the International Corporate Governance Network, an investor-led group of firms managing over $59 trillion in global assets, specifically called on governments to collaborate internationally to criminalize ecocide. Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, we respectfully suggest to the Assembly that it is time to address the criminal threat to the future of human civilization in all seriousness. We invite you to support the call of a world under threat and to stand in solidarity with future generations and with each other. We invite you to amend the Rome Statute to include a crime of ecocide. Thank you.
I thank you very much for your statement. Now, this was the last speaker on my list. I would like to therefore thank all the speakers for their statements presented during the general debate agenda item. And unless there are any requests for the floor, this agenda item is closed and the meeting is adjourned. I thank you very much for your participation.